Hi, in this video we're going to look at factorising. Here we go. So here is a typical factorised question, and we're going to look to try and find some factors that both of these parts have. Right, so I'm looking at the numbers first. This one's got a 12 and this one's got a 15. So the quickest way usually is to find a factor between those two. Now to do that, I'm going to think of what times table 12 and 15 both appear in. Well, they're both in the 1 times table. And they're both in the 3 times table, and that's it. So I'm going to use 3 as my common factor. So to do that, I'm going to think, how do I make 12m if I had to start with a 3? Well, I'd do 3 times by 4, and then times it by m. Right, that's 12m done. Let's look at 15 now. Same process. How would I make 15 if I had to start with the number 3? And again, I've chosen number 3 because it was the highest times table that they were both in. So 3 times by 5 would make 15. Now, the way we display our answer is we're going to group our factors on the outside of a bracket. So as you can see, they both have a common factor of 3, so that can sit on the outside of the bracket. And everything else that's not a common factor will now sit on the inside of the bracket. So you've got a 4 and an m, so I'm going to put 4m here, and I've got a 5 over here. Don't worry about that, that's a times by 5 and that's a times by 4m. I'm going to put the 4m here and the 5m here, also the 5 there. Because this is a positive, I'm also going to place the positive in there. We have now factorised our expression. Let's try another one. Okay, so this time, again, we're looking for a common factor. They both have numbers. Is there a common factor between 8 and 4? So they're both in the 1 times table, they're both in the 2 times table, and they're both in the 4 times table. I can't think of anything else, so we're going to use 4 as our common factor. How do I make 8y if I had to start with a 4? Well, I'd do 4 times by 2 times by y. Same process for the 4. How would you make 4 if you had to start with 4? Well, I'd do 4 times by 1. Now, same again, I have to display it in a certain way. I've got common factors on the outside of a bracket, non-common factors on the inside of a bracket. So they've both got a 4. So 4 can live on the outside. They don't have anything else in common. So I've got a 2 and a y on the left-hand side. So 2y can go there. And I've actually got a 1 over here. So therefore, this time it's a minus sign. So I'm going to put a minus sign in there. We have now factorised that expression. Let's try another one. Okay, so this time we've got 15 and we've got 9. So what times table are they both in? They're both in the 1 times table, obviously. They're both in the 3 times table. And that's it. You could sit here and look for other ones if you want, but they are both in the 3 times table. So I'm going to use 3 as my common factor. How do you make 15 with a 3? Well, 3 times by 5. How do you make 9a starting with a number 3? Well, I'd do 3 times by 3 to get the 9, and then I've also got to times it by a. Right, so here comes my bracket. Common factors live on the outside, so they've both got a 3, so that can live there, and they've not got anything else in common. So this one's only got a 5 left, so I'll put the 5 there, and this one's got a 3 and an a, so I'm going to put the 3a here, and because it's a positive, means it's a positive in the middle. We've now factorised that expression. Let's try another one. Right, so we've got 36 and we've got 12. What times table are they both in? Well, they're both in the 1 times table, they're both in the 2 times table, they're both in the 4 times table, they're both in the 6 times table. Now, people usually stop at 6. They're actually both in the 12 times table as well. So I'm going to use 12. Remember, we look for the highest times table they're both in. So how would I make 36 starting with the number 12? Well, I'd do 12 times by 3. How would I do 12e starting with the 12? Well, 12 times by e. So therefore, anything that is common can live on the outside of a bracket. As we can see, they both have a common 12. This one has a 3, and this one has an e, and it's a negative sign in the middle. If this was a 2-mark question, I would have got 2 marks for this answer. Now let's backtrack for a second. Let's imagine that we'd not noticed that they were both in the 12 times table. Okay, so imagine we stopped at 6 times table. So would I still get the correct answer if I used 6 on the outside? So how would I make 36 using a 6? Well, I would have done 6 times by 6. How would I make 12e? Well, I would have done 6 times by 2 times by e. Okay, what do they have in common this time? Well, they've both got a 6, so the 6 would live on the outside. And I've now got a 6 left over here, and I've got a 2 and an e left over here. There we go. And a minus sign, I'm going to put a minus sign. So technically that's correct. I have factorized it, but I didn't use the biggest possible factor. I used a factor. This would get me 1 mark because it is still technically correct. Okay, let's try another. In fact, it's time for you to try some. Okay, so pause the video here, look for the highest common factor that you can find, stick that in the outside the brackets, and I'm going to put the answers on the board in a second. Good luck. Okay, here come the answers. Give them a tick, give them a cross. Hopefully you did use the correct factor. Again, some of your answers may be correct. You just didn't use the biggest possible factor on the outside. Okay, practice makes perfect on these. So what I'm going to do is ask you to pause the video again and try these ones now. Okay, here come the answers. Again, hopefully you're starting to get the idea behind this process. It is a little bit of a tough one. People do get stuck on this quite a lot. Let's try some trickier ones. Okay, so hopefully you've noticed on this one, they do not have a similar number. This one has a 1 in front of it really, and that one's in 3. So the only times table they're both in, 1 and 3, is 1. So if the only times table you can think of, we're going to kind of jump into the letters. Have they got anything in common? Well, I think that one, they've both got an M. So because this one is 1 times by m times by m, and this one is m times by 3. What I'm looking at here is I've really done a common factor of m. I noticed that they've both got an m. Really, I could have done 3 times by m. Hopefully I've not confused you there. Right, so I've now broken them down into little tiny pieces. So anything common can live on the outside. So they've both got an m. So an m can live on the outside of the bracket this time. Do they have anything else? No, they don't. So what am I left with? I've got 1 and an m. And I've got a 3. So therefore I put a plus sign in here. I don't really need the 1 there. So I don't really need it, but I wouldn't be penalised for that. I would still get full marks if I did. I'll put a 1 there. Let's try another question. Right, so we've got 5h and a h squared. Again, if there's no number there, it means there's an automatic 1 there. But again, 5 and 1, they're only in the 1 times table. So we now need to look at the letters. I think they've both got a h because I can see that they've both got a h. So here we go. I'm going to start off by saying h times by 5 because I'm looking at my common factor first this time. They've both got a h. I'm going to use that as my starting value. If anything, they're both in the h times table if you want to think of it that way. How would I make 1h squared? Well, I'd start off with h, and I'd times it by h, and times by 1. I don't need the 1 there, but just in case anyone's unsure. Right, what is common? They've both got a h, so a h goes on the outside, and they've got nothing else in common, so the 5 would live there, and this has got 1h. I'm only going to put h there for now. This is a positive sign in the question, so I'm going to put a positive in the middle gap there. I've now factorized that expression. I've taken a common factor of h out of the question. Next one. Right, this one does have numbers again, so we'll go back to our number technique. We've got 10 and 30. So they're both in the 1 times table, they're both in the 2 times table, they're both in the 5 times table, and they're both in the 10 times table. No other times table that they're both in, so we're going to use 10 as our factor number. So how would I make 10y squared starting with the number 10? Well, that's easy. I'd do 10 times by 1 times by y times by y, because that would give me the y squared. If it was just a single y, it would have been a single y down here. Y squared means y and a y. How do you make 30y? Well, I would have done 10 times by 3 times by a single y. Right, what can we stick on the outside now? So they both have a 10. So a 10 can live on the outside. But hopefully you've spotted this as well. They both have a y. So a y can also sit on the outside. You can have multiple things on the outside, to be honest, as long as they are common. I've had a look. There's nothing else that's common in between those two. So I've got a 1y over here. I'm going to write just 1y. And on this side, I've got a 3. And it's a positive sign, so a positive sign. There we go. That's been now factorized. Right, let's try this one then. So we've got numbers again, so let's have a look at the numbers first. 15 and 9, they're both in the 1 times table, they're both in the 3 times table, and that is it. So how do you make 9t? I'd do 3 times by 3 times by t. And how do you make 15t squared? I'd do 3 times by 5 times by t times by t. What do they have in common? They've both got a 3, obviously. And again, this time they've got a common letter as well, so T can go on the outside, and that's pretty much it. So what are we left with? We've got a 3 that's not been underlined, and we've got a 5 and a T that's not been underlined, and this time it's a minus sign in the middle, so a minus sign in the answer. There's our answer. Right, your turn, off you go. I'm going to pause the video here. I'm going to put the answers on the board in a second. Good luck. Okay, here come the answers. Give them a tick, give them a cross. Again, some of your answers may actually be correct, especially these ones down here. It just depends whether you've used the correct factor. Okay, so can we factorize an expression that has 3 terms? And the answer is yes, as long as they've got a common factor. So they've all got numbers in this one, so let's have a look at the numbers first. We've got an 8, a 10, and a 6. Now they're all in the 1 times table, they're all in the 2 times table, and that is it. So 2 is the highest number in 8, 10 and 6. So let's use 2 as our factor number. How would you make 8a? Well, I'd do 2 times by 4 times by a. How would I make 10b? Well, 2 times by 5 times by b. And how would I make 6c? 2 times by 3 times by c. All I'm looking to do is find a common factor. As you can probably see, the common factor here is 2, identified by this anyway. So 2 can live on the outside. What's left? We've got a 4 and an a. We've got a 5 and a b. And we've got a 3 and a c. And I'm going to close the bracket there. In between the first 2 terms, there was a positive sign. So between those 2 terms, there's a positive. And in between those 2 terms, there's a negative. And there is my answer. I've now factorized a 2 out of that question. What about this one then? Well, to be honest, this one doesn't have a number, so it's an automatic 1. Then you've got a 1, an 8, and a 4. So they're really only in the 1 times table, so I can't really use my number technique. So do they have a common letter? Yes, they do. They all have a H involved in it. So they're all in the H times table, if you want to think of it that way. So how would I make H squared starting with a H? Easy. H times by H. How would I make 8H starting with a H? That would be 8 H times by 8. And how would I make 4HP starting with a H? So I'd do 4 times by H times by 4 times by P. What's common? As you can see, they've all got that common factor of H, so that sits on the outside. Then I've got H, I've got an 8, and I've got a 4P that haven't been underlined. This time there's pluses in between both of them, so pluses in between both of them. And they have taken out a common factor of H. What about this one then? So back to 2 things. This is a bit harder, but hopefully you're getting the idea now. There's numbers involved again, so what times tables? We've got the 1 times table, the 2 times table, and that is it. So let's start off. We've got 2 times by 4 times by m times by m times by n times by n times by n. That one had 2 m's, m squared, and 3 n's, so 3n. This one, how would I start this off? Well, I've got to start with 2, haven't I? Because my common factor is 2. So 2 times by 5 times by m times by n. Right, so my answer is going to be, what's common? They've both got a 2. So I'm going to put my answer down here for this one. So I've got a common factor of 2. They've both got at least 1 m, so that can sit on the outside. And they've both got at least 1 n. What do we have left? Well, over here I've got a 4, an m, and an n, and an n. So I'm going to write that as 4m n squared. Remember, I had two n's that were left and only had one m that was left. And on this side, I've only really got a 5. That's it. So close the brackets off. There's a positive in between the two terms, so positive in between the two terms. A little bit crazier again. Here we go. We've got numbers involved, so 15 and 20. They're both in the 1 times table and they're both in the 5 times table. That's all I can think of. So here we go. 5 times by 3 will make the 15. Times by y, times by y, times by y, times by y. That'll be 4y's, or y to the power of 4. I've also got times by t, times by t, times by t. There's your t power 3. And then, wow, I've got times by p, times by p, times by p, times by p, and times by p. Right, I'm not going to have any space over here for this one, I don't think, so I'm going to write this underneath. So how do you make 20 using a 5? 20 times by 4 will get rid of 20. And then I've got a single y, I've got 2 t's, and I've got p times by itself 3 times. Right, okay. I'm going to put my answer down here then. So what do they have in common? Well, they've both all got a 5. So I've got a 5. They've both got at least one y. So one y. They've actually got one t. They've actually got 2 t's each. So 2 t's can sit on the outside. Remember, common things sit on the outside. And they've actually got 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3 p's. So p cubed. There's lots of things on the outside there. They've both got a common 5, they've both got a common y, they've both got 2 t's, and they've both got 3 common p's. On the inside then, what's left? Wow, we've got a 3. We've got 3 y's, so I'm going to put that here. So y to the power of 3. We've also got 1 single t, and we've got p squared that's left because you've got 2 p's. There's the first part. I'm going to run out of space probably. And then you've got a 4. And that's it, actually. We'll be okay. We've got only a 4. That's the only thing that's not underlined, so a 4. And this was a negative sign in the middle and a negative sign in the middle. And there is our answer factorized. Bit of a crazy one, that, to be fair. Okay, your turn. Pause the video here. Have a go at these. Just break them down into the common terms and you should be fine. Answers coming up in a short while. Good luck. Okay, here come the answers. Give them a tick, give them a cross. Hopefully you got everything. I've just noticed that I've missed a bracket off there, so I'm going to put that in there for you now. Yeah, hopefully that's okay. And that's pretty much all you need to know about factorising single brackets anyway. So hopefully you've learnt something. Hopefully you know what to look for now. And thanks for watching.